I don't know how else to explain what happened. Well, I do, but you'd think I was nuttier than a fruitcake.
You're listening to Unbound Off Script. No outlines, no safety nets, just Beth Curry talking about whatever the hell she wants, or whatever the hell you've asked her to uncover. It's unfiltered, it's unpredictable, and it's officially started. Pull up a chair.
Hey, all you beautiful listeners. Thank you for coming back. Grab a coffee, tea, whatever. I have a feeling this might be long. I'm not sure though. But I want to talk about something that I think about more than I probably admit. And I admit it a lot. Signs. Not the neon ones, not the ones that say open or exit or caution wet floor. Although honestly, I think those last ones are doing the Lord's work and deserve more credit. But I mean the other kind, the kind that kind of show up when you weren't expecting them, like the feather on the path or the song that comes on at exactly the wrong or the right moment. Maybe an animal that appears on the worst day of your month and just kind of sits there looking at you like it knows something. You know what I'm talking about, right? A number that you see so often, it starts to feel like someone's tapping you on the shoulder. I've talked about some of these before on the show, and I've gotten a lot of messages about those moments, probably more than almost anything else I've talked about. I think a lot of us are kind of walking around with these quiet little experiences that we don't say out loud because we don't want to sound unhinged, right? And then when someone else says it first, we kind of exhale for the first time in a long time. So today I'm going there all the way. I want to talk about signs, the spiritual, the personal, the strange, and the beautiful. And at the end, I'm going to tell you the full story of what I teased at the top. So I'm going to start with angel numbers, okay? Because they're probably the most universally shared experience of this kind. You don't have to be spiritual. You don't have to believe in anything in particular. You can be the most grounded, pragmatic, show me the data person in the room, right? And you will still notice that you've looked at the clock at 1:11 every single day for 2 weeks, and it's starting to kind of feel a little pointed, right? So angel numbers are repeating number sequences like 111 and 222 and 333 and so on. Many people believe that they carry meaning beyond coincidence, and I'm one of those people. They show up on clocks or on license plates, receipts, page numbers, addresses, like places so ordinary that you can't quite explain why you noticed, and yet you did, and you always do. Before I go through each one, I want to address the thing that some of you are already thinking, because I know some of you and some of you are sitting there going, isn't this just confirmation bias? I'm one of those people too. And the honest answer is maybe, partly, I don't know. Confirmation bias is the psychological tendency to notice and remember information that confirms what we already believe or want to believe, right? While filtering out everything that doesn't. It's not a bad thing, exactly. It's just like how the human brain manages the absolutely overwhelming volume of information it receives every single damn second of every single damn day, right? Your brain is not trying to deceive you. It's just trying to protect you from a data overload, right? Like it filters and it highlights and it shows you what it thinks you need to see. So yes, if you start looking for 111, you will find 111. That's real, absolutely. But here's the flip, and this is the part that I think gets kind of left out of the discussion. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who spent his career mapping the architecture of the human psyche, had a concept he called synchronicity. We all love it, right? He defined it as a meaningful coincidence or connection between an inner experience and an outer event that has no causal relationship but carries undeniable personal significance. He wasn't a fringe thinker and he wasn't writing fantasy. He was one of the most rigorous psychological minds of the 20th century. And he spent decades arguing that the universe is not indifferent, that meaning is not always manufactured, and that sometimes things line up in ways that exceed what probability alone can account for, right? So Jung didn't think synchronicity was supernatural exactly. He thought it was pointed to something deeper, like what he called the collective unconscious, like a layer of the psyche that we all share that connects us to each other and to something larger than individual experience. So the repeating number isn't necessarily the message. The noticing is the message, okay? The fact that something broke through your brain's filter and made you stop. And that's the data point that you have to examine. So I'm not here to tell you that 111 is magic. I'm not here to tell you the moment you stop and register it, that pause, that internal, that's your psyche flagging something worth your attention. Okay. So what you do with it is up to you. So I'm going to go through them now. So 111 is the one people notice first. And I think that's because it's the most urgent feeling of the sequence. It's a new beginning number, right? It shows up when something is starting or when you're in the middle of a beginning and you haven't quite admitted it to yourself yet. Psychologically, this maps onto what's called a threshold moment. A liminal space, that in-between place where one chapter is ending and another is taking shape but hasn't fully formed. Liminal comes from the Latin limen, meaning threshold, and psychologists use it to describe the disorienting kind of unmoored feeling of being between identities or life stages or something like divorce and job loss, a diagnosis, a death, the period after a significant ending before the new thing has a name. Right? So 111 shows up in liminal space a lot in my experience. And what it says spiritually, psychologically, can't talk already, however you want to receive it, is what you are thinking right now matters. Okay? In that moment when you see it, what you are thinking in that moment matters. Your thoughts are seeds. Pay attention to what you're planting. Okay? It's like a tuning fork for your inner world or something. If your thoughts are heavy when 111 shows up, that's information. If they're hopeful, that's also information. The number isn't telling you what to think. It's asking you to notice that you are thinking. Okay? I've had stretches in my life where I saw 111 so relentlessly that I started to wonder if I was developing some kind of a fixation. And then I looked back at what was actually happening during those periods. And every single time, every damn time, I was standing at a threshold. So, the numbers weren't telling me what to do. They were just confirming that I was like in a significant moment and maybe I should stop pretending I wasn't. Makes sense? 222 is a bit softer. It's kind of like the exhale after the breath hold, right? Where 111 is the activation. 222 is trust. It speaks to patience, to partnership, to the idea that things are unfolding the way that they're supposed to, even when you can't see it from where you're standing. This one has a strong psychological resonance with attachment theory, specifically with what psychologists call secure attachment, the internal belief that you are held, that the world is fundamentally safe, and that relationships can be trusted. A lot of us didn't get that wired in early. A lot of us learned through experience that waiting is dangerous and that if you're not vigilant and if you're not controlling, things will fall apart. But 222 is the counter message to that wound, right? It says you don't have to hold everything together right now. Something else is holding it. Whether that something is God or the universe or a trusted person, even your own deeper wisdom, probably, it doesn't matter. The message is the same. You are not as alone in this as you feel. Okay. So when I see 222, especially during seasons of relational stress, when I'm worried about someone I love, or maybe when a relationship is in kind of a tender place, I try to receive it as a hand on the shoulder, not yet, keep trusting, keep going. 333 is the one that feels creative and expansive to me, and that kind of tracks with what it's traditionally understood to mean. It's the number of expression, of communication, of bringing something that lives inside you out into the world where it can be seen, right? It's the nudge to say the thing you've been turning over, to write the thing, to make the call, to have the conversation you've been avoiding. Psychologically, 333 connects to what Abraham Maslow placed near the top of his famous hierarchy of needs, self-actualization. So, that's the drive to become what you are capable of becoming and to express what is uniquely you. And Maslow believed that most people never fully get there, not because they lack the capacity, but because the more fundamental needs below it are still kind of hungry, right? Like safety and belonging and esteem. So when those are unmet, self-expression feels like a luxury, I guess. And 333, I think, shows up when you're actually ready, when the conditions are more right than you realize and you're still hesitating. That's when it shows up. It's the tap on the arm that says it's time now. Go ahead, say it, do the thing. It appears in my life most often when I'm in the middle of writing something that scares the shit out of me, which is most of what I write, I guess. But I've kind of learned to treat it like a green light. Okay. 444, just me seeing that number, it makes me feel calm and it makes sense. It's grounding, it's roots, it's stability, it's foundation. It's the number I associate most directly with grief because it shows up, at least in my experience, most powerfully in the moments when everything feels like it's shifting under your feet and you desperately need to know that the ground is still there. So there's a concept in trauma psychology called a window of tolerance. I've talked about this before. I did a whole episode about it. It's really important. Go back and find it. So you just do a search. I don't know what platform you're using to listen to my podcast, but look for this episode because it is an eye opener. So the window of tolerance is a zone of the nervous system activation where you're present enough to function, but not so overwhelmed that you've gone into fight, flight, or freeze. So grief, especially acute grief, blows that window wide open. Okay. Everything is too much. Nothing feels safe. The nervous system is in a constant state of alarm because it's searching for the person or the animal or the life that is no longer there and not finding them over and over and over. And that search is exhausting in a way that is genuinely physiological. It's not just emotional. And 444 in those moments is the psychic equivalent of someone pressing both hands firmly on your shoulders and saying, you are still here. The ground is still here. You are held. It's protective feeling. It's almost physical. Like I said, it makes me feel calm when I see it. I have felt 444 in my body during some of the worst seasons of my life. And every time it was the same message. This is not going to take you out. You are more rooted than you know. 555 means change. And I know that sounds either exciting or terrifying, depending on your relationship with change, which is really your relationship with control, which is really your relationship with fear. Okay, most of us have a complicated relationship with all three. Psychologically, our response to change is largely determined by something called our locus of control. This is a concept that was developed by psychologist Julian Rotter in the 1950s. People with an internal locus of control believe that their actions influence their outcomes. And people with an external locus of control believe that outcomes are largely determined by forces outside themselves, right? Like luck and fate and other people and the universe. Neither is completely right, but the research consistently shows that people with a more internal locus of control tend to navigate change better, not because they control more, but because they believe their response matters, which makes them more likely to act rather than freeze. So 555 is not asking you to control the change that's coming. It's asking you to trust your own capacity to meet it. Change is just movement, right? It's the only mechanism by which anything gets different. Okay? 555 is less of a warning and more of a heads up, right? Something is shifting. You're going to be okay. You've been okay before. It's cool. Next number, 666. So this one gets a bad reputation, obviously, that it does not entirely deserve. So culturally, it carries a lot of weight. Centuries of religious symbolism that have turned it into something ominous. I mean, it's in biblical scripture. If you follow the Bible, read the Bible, any of that. But in the context of angel numbers, 666 is actually a redirect, like a recalibration. It shows up when you've gotten out of balance, or when you've gone too far in your head or too deep into fear or too attached to outcomes, or if you're being too hard on yourself. And it's just asking you to kind of come back to center, right? Psychologically, this maps beautifully onto what therapists call cognitive fusion. And that's the state of being so merged with your thoughts that you can't observe them. You can only be them. You are not your anxiety. You are not your worst case scenario. You are not the story your inner critic has been narrating on repeat. And 666, so suddenly I got this weird accent. 666, strangely enough, is the number that asks you to diffuse, to step back, kind of notice the thought rather than live in it. And maybe ask yourself, am I in reality right now? Or am I in a story about reality? It's not a bad question. It's actually one of the most important questions. So ask yourself that when you see it. 777, Vegas goers love this number. It's the one I feel in my chest when it shows up, right? Every single time. There's something about it that kind of hits different than the other ones because it's less instructional and more confirmational. It's not telling you to do anything. It's telling you that you already did, that you're exactly where you're supposed to be, doing exactly what you're supposed to be doing, and something much bigger than you is aware of it. Jung wrote about moments of profound meaning and moments where the inner and outer worlds kind of seem to be in perfect conversation with each other. And he described them as carrying a quality he called numinous. So from the Latin numen, meaning divine will or spirit, the numinous is the feeling that something sacred is present. Not in a religious sense necessarily, but in the sense that you have touched something that exceeds ordinary experience. You know the feeling like if you've never had a word for it, like the hair standing up, the breath catching, that kind of strange, quiet certainty that this moment matters in a way that you can't fully articulate. 777 for me is numinous, and that's it. 888 is abundance, but I want to complicate it slightly because I think abundance is one of the most misunderstood concepts in the spiritual wellness space. It gets flattened into a conversation about money or manifestation, and that's not wrong exactly, but it is so much smaller than what it actually means. So abundance, psychologically, is a posture. It's the difference between a scarcity mindset, which is that deeply ingrained belief that there's not enough, that resources are finite and you have to kind of compete for your share, and that love and safety and belonging and, those things, they can run out. And with an abundance mindset, which holds that life is generative and that there is enough and that what is meant for you will not pass you by and blah, blah, blah. So psychologist Carol Dweck's research on fixed versus growth mindsets touches the edges of this kind of, but it goes even deeper than that. Scarcity thinking is often trauma-based. I talked a lot about it in season 2 of the podcast. Definitely my experience is that it's trauma-based. It's the nervous system's response to early experiences of not having enough or not enough safety, not enough love, not enough consistency. In my case, then not enough food. It's adaptive, it kept you alive, but it can outlive its usefulness for sure. So 888 showing up is kind of an invitation to open your hands, right? To receive rather than grasp, and trust that the cycle completing is making room for something new rather than just taking something away. The number 8 on its side is infinity, right? Endless, unbroken, returning to itself. That's what 888 is pointing at. Not a windfall, a posture, right? Then there's 999, and this one can kind of hurt even when it shouldn't. 999 is endings. It's completion. It's the closing of a chapter that's kind of run its course. And I know that depending on where you are in your life right now, that might kind of land as a relief, or it might land as a stone in the chest. I don't know. I want to offer something about endings that I've had to learn the hard way, because I am by nature someone who kind of holds on, someone who's loyal past the point of wisdom sometimes, someone who's looked at things that were clearly over and thought, but maybe if I just... So psychologically, our resistance to endings is deeply tied to what's called the endowment effect. And that's the tendency to overvalue what we already have simply because we have it. Right? We attach, we invest, and the more we've invested, the harder it is to let go, regardless of whether what we're holding is still serving us. This is compounded by grief, because grief is attachment without an object, right? The person is gone, but the love isn't, and the psyche doesn't know what to do with love that has nowhere to land. So it holds on. It keeps the door open. It refuses to call it finished. 999 is not punishment. It's not loss for the sake of loss. It's the universe, or your own deepest wisdom, or whatever you believe, telling you that this particular form of this particular thing has completed its purpose. And that completion is not failure of any sort. It's the only way that the next thing gets to begin, right? So I've seen 999 in some of the most devastating seasons of my life. And looking back, every single time, every ending it was pointing to made room for something I could not have imagined from the other side of it. Now, what I want to actually say about all of this, the thing that matters more than I think any individual number, the skeptic's argument is that all of this is just pattern recognition, that the human brain is a meaning-making machine, true, and repeating numbers are simply the kind of pattern our brains are wired to catch. Maybe true. Sure. We're pattern recognition creatures. It's one of the most sophisticated things our brains do. We find faces and clouds and stories and constellations and meaning and sequences of numbers because meaning is how we survive, right? We're not rational animals with occasional emotions. We are meaning-making animals, full stop, and everything else is downstream of that. So what the pure skeptic's argument leaves out, the meaning-making is not incidental, right? Whether the universe placed that 111 in your path or your brain selected it from a field of noise, you paused, you noticed it, you asked yourself what was true, you checked in with your own inner life for a moment, you made meaning. That's not nothing. It's the entire point of being a conscious creature on this planet. The noticing is the practice. The practice is the point. So keep noticing. I want to talk about Jesse. If you're a regular listener to the podcast, you've heard the story already. Some of you know who Jesse is. I've mentioned him before. He was my friend and he died. And he is one of the most present absences in my life, which kind of sounds like a contradiction until you've lost someone and then understand exactly what that means. Jesse pulls my hair. I know that sounds crazy. I'm telling you anyway. The first time it happened, I was in the middle of an ordinary moment, which is always when it happens, isn't it? Nobody gets a mystical experience while they're prepared for one. It's always kind of while you're doing the dishes or sitting in your car, walking from one room to another. And I felt it. It was a distinct, gentle tug at the back of my hair. And there was nobody there. I stood still and I knew. I knew because he used to pull my hair when he was alive, and it felt exactly the same, and it just came on in exactly the same way. I don't need you to believe me. I'm not asking for that. But I'll tell you that it's happened more than once, and always at moments that felt specific. Moments where I needed to know I wasn't alone, or moments where I was thinking about him, or moments that he would have found significant if he were still here in the way that we understand here. Right? And every time it's him. I know it in the way you know the voice of someone you love before they finish the word. I just know. I just know. Signs from people who've crossed over are almost never the enormous, unmistakable events that we imagine when we think about it from the outside, right? They're quiet and they're small and they're just kind of woven into the texture of an ordinary day, a smell with no source or a song that shouldn't be playing or a sensation that has no physical explanation. I've talked about this a lot as well when I tell people about all the things that happened right after my dad died. It's crazy to me. And if you know me or you were with me during that and you experienced it too, you're a believer now because it's just so crazy. And my whole life has been like this. The quiet, though, it's on purpose, I think, because, if these people showed up in ways that were impossible to explain away, we'd spend our whole lives waiting for the next big one instead of learning to live in the practice of noticing. The small ones make us pay better attention, I guess, I think there's a lesson in that somewhere. Rainbows are the one that I think almost everyone shares at some level because there's something in the human nervous system that responds to a rainbow the way it responds to very little else. Kind of involuntary softening, I guess. You don't decide to feel it just kind of happens. And across nearly every spiritual and religious tradition that has ever existed on this planet, the rainbow is a sign of covenant, of promise, of the space where two different things, the sky and the earth, heaven and ground, the seen and the unseen, meet and become visible, right? I see rainbows at specific moments. Not every rainbow is a message, but some of them are. And by now I've learned to tell the difference, not by anything logical, but by what happens viscerally or even in my chest when I see them. Some rainbows are just beautiful. It's fine. Some of them make me stop breathing for a second. The second kind of the ones I pay attention to. Feathers is another one I've talked about. Feathers are probably the most commonly reported sign across cultures and traditions. White feathers especially. I've heard from listeners, dozens of you, who've found feathers in places that made no logical sense. Same. On a windowsill that was never open, in the middle of a room, in a place you walked past 5 minutes earlier and it wasn't there. Indoors. Okay? The meaning most often attributed to feathers is exactly what you want it to be. You're not alone. Someone's watching, someone's near. It's comfort made physical and left somewhere where you will find it. I believe that. I found feathers in enough strange places. I've stopped trying to explain them and just started saying thank you. Planting things is another thing. I've talked extensively about how I've never had a green thumb. But with all the death I've been surrounded by, I've needed to attach to something living. So I started planting things. Mind you, I started a long time ago, long before this period, but we'll get there. So everything we've covered so far has been about signs that come to you and things that arrive and things you find and things that show up in your path. And those matter. They matter enormously, of course. But the other kind of sign making that I've been doing for a long time, but a lot more lately, is when something happens that I don't have words for, like something too big or too final or too significant for language, I put something in the ground. I plant. It started with my first son. When he died, I planted a tree. with his dad. I couldn't explain to you then why that felt like the right thing to do. I just knew that I needed something living to mark it, you know? Something that would keep growing when everything inside me had gone completely still. Something I could go stand next to when I needed to feel like the world was still moving forward, even if it wasn't. It's been over 30 years, 32 years, and that tree is huge now. Um, when we moved into our first house, I planted a tree. When we moved into the one after that, I planted another. Not because I read somewhere that you should, but just because a new home felt like a living thing that deserved to be marked with something living, A stake in the ground. We're here. This matters. And I've loved watching these trees grow over the years. And when Ty died, I put lilac bushes in the ground. I don't know. Lilacs are the kind of thing that bloom extravagantly for a short season and then hold its ground quietly for the rest of the year. But these ones bloomed 3 times that first year after I put them in the ground. So, you know, more signs, I guess. I don't know. When my dad died, I planted a whole ass garden. Not a tree, not a bush, a garden. And last year, we did all kinds of backyard landscaping. Spent so much money. But I have all these new gardens that have been working on. And my dad was the kind of person whose loss didn't have a single object that could contain it, right? I think he needed more space than a tree. He needed a whole place. So I started this garden. And there's this psychological concept that maps onto this so precisely that when I learned about it, I kind of felt like someone had been watching me in my garden. And it's called continuing bonds theory. Have you ever heard of that? It's a framework in grief psychology that challenged the older model, which said that healthy grieving meant detaching from the person you lost and moving on. Continuing bonds says the opposite. It says that maintaining a symbolic, ongoing connection to someone you've lost is not pathological. It's not avoidance. It's actually one of the most adaptive things a grieving person can do. You don't sever the relationship, you transform it, right? You find new ways to hold it. And planting is that for me. It's a continuing bond made physical. I think it's like a relationship, finding a new form or something, one that kind of lives in the ground and grows in the direction of the light, and one that I can tend and water and watch. And it asks something of me in grief that has nowhere to go, is grief that doesn't consume you whole. So, I've given it a place to go. And there's something in the ritual itself, I think, that matters too. And ritual is something we've largely lost in modern Western culture. We don't have enough of it anymore. We don't have enough moments where we stop and say, this is significant, and I'm marking it as such, and I'm doing it with my body and my hands and my presence. And ritual, too, it creates what psychologists call meaning structures. And these are frameworks that help the mind organize overwhelming experience into something that has shape and therefore something that can eventually be held, right? When you plant something, you're performing a ritual. You're saying this loss is real, and I'm not going to let it pass without acknowledgement. So like I said, last year we put in these several new gardens, and in the newest one, I needed a focal point, something that would anchor the whole space and give it center and make it feel intentional rather than just accumulated. And I went doing this with Trixie, my kitty, in mind. I found it, a vanilla strawberry hydrangea tree. Not a shrub, it's a tree with a long, clean trunk and this explosion at the top, which will be cream and blush and deepening pink as the season moves. I think it's dramatic in the best way. Kind of the thing that you build a garden around. And like I said, that's going in for Trixie. We're waiting on the fence that needs to be replaced before the tree goes in, and we're getting that done, and then the tree's going in the ground, and when it does, the garden will have its center, and I will have somewhere to stand when I miss her. Which right now is a lot of the time, and I expect it will be for a while. But the thing about the tree not being in the ground yet, it's still waiting. The fence isn't done. I'm typically a very impatient person. I just go, 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 go. I want to see things getting done. The ground isn't ready, though. There's something about that, about a memorial that's still becoming, that feels true to where I am with this particular grief. It hasn't settled yet, but the color's coming back. I'm going to get into that in a second. Spring is tasting like spring again. I'm also still underneath all of that missing TT. All of these things are true at the same time. The tree will go when the ground is ready. And grief, I think, works exactly the same way, right? And then there's blue balloons. I've talked about these as well. This one's personal in a way that's still kind of, I don't know. I can't put it to words. So my son, Kier, some of you know Kier. He's mine. The way that some people are yours, even after they're gone, completely irreversibly, permanently yours. Blue balloons are how I know he's with me. thing about signs, they tend to be specific to the relationship. They're not generic. They're chosen in some way. In some way I don't fully understand to match the connection. And blue balloons make sense for cure in a way that I hold privately. But I'll share a small piece of it. I'm not going to share how blue balloons came to be for me and his dad because that's personal, but I'll tell you a little bit more. When Crew was little, he went to speech therapy. We were referred to a practice called Blue Balloon. And it was one of those kind of ordinary parenting moments that you don't think twice about at the time. You just show up, you do the thing, you help your kid, whatever. You don't know it's going to mean something, you know. You don't attach the meaning until you go home and you're just sitting there thinking about it. Blue balloons were already in my life as a concept, tethered. They're tethered to my children and to care and to showing up for people you love, right? And then there was that day, a year and a half ago, I guess. I visited my mom. She has dementia, and her world's gotten smaller and smaller over the years in the way that dementia does. It's a bastard. It takes people slowly by degrees, which is its own kind of ouchie. But I went to see her, and I walked into the room where we were going to sit together, and there was just this balloon, it was huge, large blue balloon. If you're on my socials, my personal socials, you saw me with it. I just held it, and it was huge. No explanation, no occasion, no reason for it to be in that room on that day. I looked at it, and I held it, and I had my picture taken with it because I couldn't believe it. And I said his name quietly because I knew. Blue balloons randomly appearing, and I mean randomly, in places that make no practical sense, to me, are cure. And when I see one, I don't analyze it, I just receive it. He found a way to show up in the spaces where I needed him. And he picked something I'd recognize. I guess that's maybe who he would have been, Anyway, I also want to talk about people who leave dimes because I know a lot of people who've experienced this. You've probably heard it. Maybe you've experienced it as well. Dimes show up at impossible places. Pockets of clothes you haven't worn in years. The center of a floor you just walked across. Surfaces where there was nothing a moment before. A whole ass community of grieving people have come to understand dimes as the calling card of specific people that they've lost. I've heard it said that dimes are chosen because they're small enough not to startle you, but specific enough not to be explained away. You don't trip over a dime, right? You notice it. It makes you pause and pick it up and hold it in your palm and ask yourself who it's from. I think the people who leave dimes tend to be the ones who maybe in life showed love through small, consistent gestures rather than grand ones, right? They're the people who always showed up or who left little things in your path to remind you that they were thinking of you. In death, they're still doing exactly that, but they're still showing up. They're still leaving small things for you to find. I have a person who leaves dimes. I won't say who, but when I find one, especially in a place that stops me, I say thank you and I mean it. And I feel less alone than I did 5 seconds before. We've all been there. Blue Jays, I've also talked about my dad. If you've listened to the show for any length of time, you know about my dad. You know about baseball and my best buddy and the particular, I don't know, just the shitty loss that went with losing him. The grief doesn't end. It kind of changes, right? It just finds new containers. And blue jays started showing up after he died with a frequency that went well beyond what I could attribute to bird migration patterns or backyard ecology. Okay. They would lay closer than birds usually do. They would look directly at me. Have you ever had a bird look right at you? My gosh, they're funny. And I know how that sounds, but bird people will tell you that most birds don't make sustained eye contact with humans. Blue jays in my yard do. The one in my yard does. I've had particular moments with one particular blue jay. Unmistakable, recurring. I can't explain. I've stopped trying to. Not gonna. I know you think I'm crazy. I don't care. He's my dad. Checking in, making sure things are okay. Probably also judging my garden a little because that tracks. And then there's Dave. Dave was my dad. But Dave is also our rabbit. A wild rabbit who appeared in our yard and decided he lived here now. In the way I guess that some animals just make that decision and you simply accept it. Dave is enormous and he's unbothered. Dave might be a girl. I don't know. Haven't checked. Not going to. Has a personality that I have no choice but to respect. And Dave is also, I'm fairly convinced, my dad visiting in a different configuration. This is why Bunny got the name Dave. My dad was a man who took up space with quiet authority. He was present without being loud and he showed up consistently on his own schedule. He was just there. That's Dave. Dave is so completely, specifically, unmistakably the energy that I think is my dad. Absolutely. And again, you're allowed to decide that's crazy I've made peace with it. It's okay. Red wings, this one's newer, still kind of revealing itself to me in some ways, still becoming clear. The red-winged blackbird, that flash of crimson on the wing, that unmistakable call has become a presence I associate with a different grief, a different loved one, a different flavor of the missing. When I see red wings, I go quiet. I pay attention. I let them mean what they mean without trying to force it into language. Um, I'm still the caring for a while phase with this one, and I'm okay with it. Signs like grief kind of reveal themselves in their own timeline, whatever. So now I'm going to tell you about parks. So if you are on my personal socials, you already know about parks. We weren't going to get another cat. And I should say that up front, not no, we definitely were going to, but telling ourselves otherwise way. I mean it. We were not planning to add another cat. You have to understand the context of that. So I'll give it to you. When Ty died, we didn't get another cat. Of course we love Ty. He was our first foster fill. He was part of life. He was part of everything. And when he was gone, the space he left, we didn't try to fill it, right? But shortly after, Angel came to us. It was just a couple months after. Angel was my dad's cat, and she needed a home after he died. And we were the somewhere, That wasn't us seeking comfort. That was us being the answer to someone else's need. And Angel has been a grace in our house, this quiet little funny creature who still carries something of my father in the way that, she moves through the room and gives actual friggin' hugs. Anyway, I've talked about her on another episode. I think that one's coming up. And then Hazel died, and Hazel was Hazel. And if you knew her, that requires no elaboration. If you didn't, I'm sorry, because she was truly something. When Hazel left, we didn't get another cat. We held what we had. We had Micah, the OG. We had Trixie, another OG, and we had Angel. I talked about Trixie on the show recently. I did a whole episode about her, which is kind of crazy. About spring and what spring has meant to me and what it stopped meaning for a little while there. And I said in that episode that spring was always my favorite season, renewal and hope and life coming back after everything goes quiet. And then something shifted because the last 3 years in a row at the start of spring, we've had death in our immediate family. Not distant, immediate. And it kind of changed the taste of the season for me, right? It made something I loved do something to my nervous system. And it just made it feel more like a warning, right? So Trixie died 2 weeks and 2 days ago. She was 15, a calico. If you followed her Instagram, you know exactly the face I'm talking about. There's never been another one like her. She was blind. She was selectively deaf. That episode I talked a lot about. I'm not going to get into it again here. When she left, I said something that I meant down to my bones. When Trixie left, she took the color with her. Because I have a gray cat and a black cat. And Trixie was just like full of this color and the room felt different. She was larger than life. She was, I don't know, the house felt different. The saturation had been turned down on everything. So we were not getting another cat. We were sitting in the quiet and just letting it be what it was. And then a few days after Trixie died, Parks found us. So I was doing what I do after, loss. And I was just looking for something to kind of memorialize a calico. And I don't remember exactly what I Googled, but it was just like calico memorialize. I don't know. It was just like, it was very, very generic. And the second hit down, it showed a little picture. It was just like this little tiny picture and it looked like a kitten and it actually looked like a stuffed toy. But then it said Cokie C. And I thought, well, that's kind of funny because our last initial is C. And I remembered I used to call my bestie Kelly Kiki C when we were growing up because her last initial is also C, and Cokie C. And like it caught my attention, and I scrolled a little bit, but then I went back up to it again, and I thought I'm gonna click this. So I clicked it, and it actually took me to Pet Finder. So I'm like, oh, this isn't a stuffed cat. Like this isn't a toy. This is an actual cat. So I was like reading about her and thinking, oh, that's nice. She's probably living in Tennessee or something. I didn't really think she was anywhere local to me, and hang on for what's coming there. It said that she was in Brampton, which is like north of Toronto. And so that's probably like a bit over an hour away from me, well over an hour because traffic. Anyway, so I'm like, wow, she is actually closer. And I started to kind of pay attention to this and I started to dig a little bit and I thought, this is weird. Like, I feel like this was sent to me because I don't know. Like it was just in my gut, something felt like I needed to be paying attention to this. Um, so I reached out to the rescue and I asked them, and they responded pretty quickly. And I discovered that she was actually out in London, which is 3 hours round trip and whatever. Not a big deal. But I started talking to foster mom in my gut, I know. Y'all think I'm crazy. But here's what I want you to understand about the timing, because the timing is the sign to me. Okay. So we ultimately, we applied to adopt Parks, is what we named her. Um, and we were accepted and we went through the whole process and everything. And I went out and picked up Parks exactly 2 weeks to the day after Trixie died, and exactly 1 year to the day after Hazel died. Um, I'm into signs. You know this. I don't think it's a coincidence. I don't know what you call it in your vocabulary. Divine timing, synchronicity, the universe being completely unsubtle. I don't know. I know what I call it. I call it a sign. I call it an answer. I call it something much bigger to me, saying spring is not a warning anymore. Spring is still what it always has been for you. Here, look. And then it kept going, because of course it did. I brought Parks home, and actually when I picked her up, I found out she came from Egypt. She was born in Egypt. Um, I've talked before. I used to work for a psychiatrist who was from Egypt, but that's nothing. Um, my mom lives in a long-term care facility, and for years that they had a facility cat, a resident cat. Um, she died last year, but her name was Cairo because she was also from Egypt. Um, so, I made that connection there, and I didn't realize that Parks, who I thought maybe was from Tennessee or somewhere in the States and completely unadoptable for me, was actually here, but she came from Egypt. Anyway, I'm just rambling on about that now. But there's more. So Parks's mother, her, the kitty who gave birth to her, is blind, just like Trixie was. So I don't know. I stopped trying to explain it and just start saying thank you as I was learning these things. But this is the last thing. This is the thing that I literally sat down on the floor for a minute when I saw this. So when Parks first came to our attention, like I said, she had her name Koki. And we weren't keeping that. We wanted something that meant something, something connected to Trixie. And I'd kind of been turning a name over in my mind because I always thought it when I looked at Trixie as she was growing up over the years. Maple. I've always seen maple in a calico, those autumn colors, that particular palette. But Nate, some of you know Nate. You've heard about Nate. His rescue dog, literally the carbon copy of his beloved lost dog, Carbon, is named Maple. And I couldn't name my cat the same thing as his dog because that would just be a whole ass thing. So we landed on Parks because Trixie loved being outside. We used to take her out in her little stroller, her kitty stroller, to parks, to the beach, strip, the garden. She lived for it. Parks felt right. Parks felt like her. So Parks. But when I opened the paperwork and looked at what her name had been before she was Koki, it was Maple. I know you saw that coming. It was already her name waiting in a document that I hadn't even read. I didn't even know. I don't know. I think it's crazy. The thing about Parks, the thing I still can't talk about without getting a little nutty in the head. I mean, you already know. She looks exactly like Trixie. Okay? She's a calico, and I've had cats my entire life. I've never seen another calico who could have passed for Trixie's twin. Not once. With calicos, this is rare, if not impossible, to get a literal photocopy of a cat and their markings. And yet here she is in this house, in this specific window of time, looking like that. So the universe was not being subtle. The universe was being flagrant, for sure. And she has something in the way she carries herself, something in the energy of her. She has traces of Ty and something that is distinctly and specifically Hazel. And she's the spitting image of Trixie. And she's somehow like all of them. She's not a replacement. Please hear me when I say that. She's not a replacement for any of them. That's not what this is. But there's something that happens sometimes. And I think you know this if you've loved animals or people and lost them, and then had something new arrive, where you start to understand that love doesn't really get used up, right? It accumulates, it compounds, it finds new vessels. Parks brought the color back. That's the only way I know how to say it. She's here now in this house. The saturation came back up. Spring, my spring, the one I thought I'd lost, is starting to feel like itself again. For the first time in 3 years, spring is going to mean life for me. Trixie knew what she was doing. She always did. That's a sign. That's a sign as clear as any number on a clock, any blue balloon in a room that has no business containing one, a blue jay that lands too close and looks too long. Parks is a sign that the love we've poured into the animals and the people and the relationships of this life don't disappear when they do. They don't disappear when those people do. It circles back. It always finds a new form, right? It shows up in the most specific, timed, impossible to ignore way, looking like the accumulated face of everyone you've ever loved. And I said yesterday, I've forgotten what it feels like to be a new mom. I've forgotten about kitten energy. She's actually 15 weeks old, but she's very tiny. And oh my Lord, she's a tornado. Waking up in the night to feed her. We just love her so much already. I don't know. I've been thinking a lot lately about why signs matter, not just what they mean, but why we need them. And I think it's this. Grief is profoundly isolating, right? Not because other people don't care, but because no one else was in your specific relationship with this specific person or animal or moment that you lost, right? No one else knows exactly how they laughed or what it felt like to be known by them or that particular texture of their absence, right? Signs collapse that isolation for a moment. They make the distance feel smaller and the evidence that love doesn't require a body to keep moving. It keeps moving because love is its own kind of force, and forces don't just stop. They transform. You're allowed to believe that. You're allowed to look for them. You're allowed to say the name of whoever you're missing when the blue jay lands in the tree, or when you find the dime on the kitchen floor, or when you look at the clock and it says 11:11 and your chest kind of just gets tight for a second. That tightness, that pause, that's not irrationality. Trust me, it's love recognizing itself across a distance we don't fully understand yet. So keep noticing that. Keep saying thank you. Keep leaving a little room in your skepticism for the things that can't be explained, because the unexplained things are often the most important things. Okay. So as of right now, there's a calico kitten in my house who looks exactly like my Trixie, with a little bit of Ty and a little bit of Hazel. And she's climbing on things she shouldn't be climbing on. And I have never been more grateful for anything in my life. I've already said to her what I knew I would say in the moment I understood what she was. I see you. I know who sent you. And I'm so glad you're here. So send help, though, because she loves to chew on my ankles. Anyway, that's it for today. Thank you for sitting with me in this. If you have your own signs, your own birds, numbers, your own moments that can't be explained, but also can't be ignored, love to hear about them. You know where to find me. You can join the Facebook group if you're not already there. Yeah, because I love this kind of stuff. I love hearing about it. And your stories that give me goosebumps. Absolutely love it. So yeah. Take care of yourselves, notice things, and I'll talk to you next time.
You've been listening to Unbound, Off Script. The script remains missing. Authorities have been notified. Beth Curry is clocking out, turning off the lights, and pretending she didn't just say all of that out loud. If you want her to do it again on a different topic, let us know. Until next time, stay curious, stay raw, keep it unbound. She's gone.